Hi guys, and welcome back to day 18 of Inktober, and today I was still definitely in the mood to do something tiny but very finished. So today's piece it's bigger than yesterday's triptych set, but it's still pretty small, and I love working in this really tiny little size. It's actually, I already start with like this huge sheet of Arch's watercolor paper, and then what you have to do is you fold it down and then tear it in half until you end up with this really tiny little piece. And I love working at this size. I mean, for one thing, because I get so many actual different pieces out of that piece of full Arches paper, so it's kind of nice to be able to get that many different uses out of it. But yeah, I really like working on tiny stuff. But this one I already had it all like edged out and everything, which was nice. And apparently last time when I did do this, I was a little bit more careful to not have like the tail ends going off, because I've noticed when I tape past the paper and then tape it like shut, it's kind of a pain taking it off. But I think that I actually ended up tearing it right at the edge of the paper, the tape that is, so that when I was taking it off, it was really easy just to take it off really quick. So I might need to learn from my past self and actually do that a little bit more, because yesterday's was kind of annoying. So yeah, I'll try to be a little bit more careful with how I tape it up and everything. But yeah, today's piece, I wasn't really sure exactly what I wanted to do for it yet, and that's usually how it is, but I just went on to Pinterest and I started looking at different ideas and looking at different photographs and searching different terms, and I find that really helpful. I honestly like to search for just keywords that would get my inspiration going. I was searching for things like witch and magic and just things that are really kind of general, but you never really know what kind of aesthetic will start showing up. And sometimes you can see this really cool, interesting idea, and then you can click on that piece, and then it just keeps bringing up more photographs that are just going down that lane of this kind of idea and aesthetic and look that I find really inspiring. So yeah, that's my favorite way of getting an idea when I don't really have ideas, is just start searching for things that I find interesting, different key terms, and then following those to where they go, because they always link to like more images below that that are relevant or interesting, or they have a similar theme to them. Anyways, so I ended up finding this really amazing picture of this woman who had like her hair was so gorgeous, and just her whole look of how her aesthetic was. I have said aesthetic too many times in this video, but her overall look, like her clothes and her hair and the jewelry that she had, and she had some like a little bit of face paint on her face, and it was really beautiful, and it really got my ideas going. And I definitely wanted to make sure that I drew her hair because it was so cool, and that was obviously by far, hopefully it's obvious, it was my absolute favorite part of this piece. In fact, I think her hair is probably the hair that I have had the most fun working on in a very long time. And I love working on hair, but this hair was just, it was really fun. And it was really fun because it was the way that the hair was shaped was very different from how I kind of formulaically create hair. So it was a chance to reanalyze how I think about hair, how I wanted to show it, how it wrapped around itself. So it was a really refreshing to be able to study this piece and look at what was actually happening in it and see how I can put that into my own way of drawing from here on out, because I do find that there are certain things that I start doing the same or have the same way of thinking, and I can make changes like the general shape of it, but when it comes down to the way that I form it, I tend to use the same kind of strokes and same kind of lines. So this was really exciting to work on something that was really a different shape and a different, like the locks of hair themselves were very different from what I usually do, and it was really very fun to work on. When I started doing the ink wash for her hair, I was really not nervous, but I was trying to be very cautious, because when I go in with darker colors for like how I'm doing her hair much darker, I find that when I'm doing it traditionally, I tend to go too dark too fast, and then I lose any chance of putting in highlights. So that's something that I'm really trying to get better at, is when I do things that are dark, I want to be able to still have shadows and highlights and variation within it, rather than it suddenly becoming so dark that you don't see any more details. So that's something that I kind of have been struggling with, and That's usually the problem that I have when I start working with much darker colors like this, especially in watercolor, and I'm trying to get better at that. But this time I was trying to be very conscious of what choices I was making and how I was putting it on there. So I did this first layer that was kind of a medium level of darkness of where I wanted it to be. I knew that overall I wanted her hair to be darker than this, but I was actually smart and I held off a little bit more. And after that dried, I think I did end up doing one more coat to make it just a little bit more harmonious overall, which actually is very helpful if you have an ink wash that's not quite perfectly smooth. There we go, smooth. Doing another layer on top can definitely help even out the whole tones of it. I mean, it won't fix huge problems, but if it's just a little bit blotchy, that can definitely help. But I did do one more coat to just make sure that it was all as harmonious as possible. And then I started going in, kind of treating each lock very carefully and on its own. So doing it, I knew that I definitely wanted some locks to be lighter overall so that they would contrast and come forward. I wanted some of them to start darker and then fade out into light. Also, one of the things that I was trying to be very careful with is that I wanted her skin tone to be a little bit lighter than her hair. So I wanted to make sure that the hair around her face was the darkest that was in her hair, because I wanted that contrast to be as strong as possible so that her face could pop out against her hair. Because at first, when I first put that base hair color down, it actually was the same value as her skin when I did her skin. So I needed to make sure that those really popped and they weren't blending in together. So I made sure that I focused the really darks on those locks around her face, and also in some of the areas that I knew I wanted them to look like they were back in shadow, or they're twisting backwards or having other hair overlapping. So I just made sure that I was really being very thoughtful with where I was putting the darkest areas, rather than making all of it really dark and then because I knew that I wanted it to look dark, but putting the very darks in very strategic locations, making sure that the ones that I wanted to be highlighted were next to a darker one, things like that. It helped it overall appear the same value that I wanted it to without losing all of those details. And I think now that I'm looking at it done, I had decided to do her clothes very light because I wanted her clothes to be light to contrast against her and the background to be completely white. But I think that I should have made her clothes a little bit of a darker value, so it would have been a light gray with a darker shadow. I think it would have just tied in with her figure a little bit more, and it would have had more of a harmonious shade to it, so it would look like her clothing is in the same light source as the rest of her. But that's just one small thing that I would like to change a little bit if I could, which I technically could, but now that I've taken the tape off, I mean, it would have the potential of bleeding past the border. So I think I'll let it be what it is. But then after I let it dry a little bit, I decided that I needed just a little bit more dark values in her hair and her skin. So I went back and added that a little bit, and that's one of the things about the ink washes, that they do dry a lot lighter than I'm expecting. And I actually have a heat gun. That green tool that you see me use every once in a while, it's a heat gun that you use for like embossing and crafting. And it's really helpful. It's super hot, like instantly, and it dries it out so quickly. So I use that a lot in this piece because it's very helpful for me to instantly be able to tell what value it's going to end up being and how it goes with recipes, so that I can immediately start working on the next area, but also fixing some values if it needs fixed. And then I wanted this moon shape behind her, and when I first painted it on, I was like, I can guess what a circle looks like, and I can paint that out pretty accurately. And I tried it, and it just looked really wonky, so then I decided, okay, I need to stop being lazy and just grab this tool that's like sitting right there. I grabbed my tape, and I traced it on there, and that first circle that I drew was so off. It was ridiculous that I chose to just guess when I had a tool right there that I could get a circle. So basically, I need to remind myself to not be lazy when things like that, because it really does actually impact the overall look. Even if someone's not looking at it and thinking, wow, that circle's not quite right, it will look sloppy. It just has that overall look. So yeah, that was my lesson. Don't spend, all this time on a piece to look nice and then cheap out when it comes to this really little detail that can make a big difference. But that is everything for today's Inktober. And as usual, she is available at my shop. So Oh, I ended up spending way too much time on this one. I knew it while I was working on it. I'm like, I need to do other stuff, but I was really enjoying painting her. But yeah, she is available, the original. And I do have lots of other prints and buttons and stuff down at my shop. So if you want to click on the button right below me, well, right at the very bottom of the video, it'll take you to my shop. But that is everything for today. So I will see you guys tomorrow for the next Inktober.